This is a non-pharmaceutical product that we've been taking for 10 years. My family, this is greenpasture.org, okay? It is fermented cod liver oil, butter oil blend. You can get 10% off if you use promo code Allison. I used to get cavities all the time when I went to the dentist, and I would go religiously every 6 months, and they would have to fill something. And then I started taking this and also cut a lot of the processed foods I was eating, so I'm sure that helped too. And then they would marvel at my teeth, but like we're talking about with Sharyl, they would never ask me what I did differently. They just didn't seem to care. But anyway, I'm going to tell you what I did. Okay, so this is it. The fermented cod liver oil, concentrated butter oil blend. And I like the cinnamon tingle flavor. My kids take it. It's, I don't know, some of you might have to shoot it down with water or juice or something. But my daughter, she loves it. She'll just take it. She doesn't need to drink. She's very brave, much braver than I am. Very excited to have Sharyl Attkisson back on. Sharyl has a new book. It is called Follow the Science. A phrase we've never heard before. We did not hear over and over again over the last few years. And Sharyl, I'm going to just ask this first question right up front. How did you get away with writing this book? I mean, I honestly, like, I am shocked that you got, not just that, like, that you wrote it and you've gotten interviews from mainstream media about it. But I know, you know, like, for instance, you have a show with Sinclair, and I'm really shocked because you go hard on the pharmaceutical industry in this book, and it really seems something that the big media has been hesitant to touch, at least over the last few years. And so it makes me wonder, like, first off, was there any pushback on this for you? Did you receive any, you know, Sharyl, don't go too far. You know, this is a bridge too far. Like, you can touch this vaccine, for instance, but you can't touch that one. Like, anything like that?
Well, I think people know that would be a recipe for disaster if they tried to limit what I can write about, because I've written about that. That would become part of another story. Believe it or not, HarperCollins asked me to write this book. And kudos to them. No, they didn't limit it. I, like you, kind of wandered up until the last minute because even the book industry is manipulated by outside interests. Mm-hmm. I thought this will never get published. Like once it gets a quick read, someone's going to leak it to somebody and someone's going to make sure it never gets published. Never had any pushback, nothing. So kudos to HarperCollins, first of all. My TV show Full Measure, we're a different model. We feed to 43 million TV households every Sunday on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, depending on where you live. But we don't sell national ads like the networks do. So we're sort of a network, but we don't sell ads to pharmaceutical companies. I don't know if they buy local ads from the local affiliates that air us, but we're a different model. And I think that frees us up to not have that same kind of conflict of interest that I experienced at CBS News that my colleagues are experiencing in other big media.
Well, I guess on that point, I've always wondered, because people talk a lot about the pharmaceutical industry funding the media, and like that's why a lot of reporters are really hesitant to touch it because they know where their paychecks come from. But I really, you know, my experience in television news was that there was far more self-censorship, or I guess true believing in the, I don't know, the holiness or the righteousness of our government officials in the CDC, for instance, and to just go along with it because we're all advocates for public safety too. Like, why would we question these people? These people are just trying to help us and to save us. And so in other words, I didn't see a lot of like beat downs in the newsroom where you had all these reporters raising their heads saying, wait a second, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Why aren't we talking about this? And then the manager saying, you better be quiet. Though that did happen to me on the issue of vaccines, which is crazy because I never questioned them. I just happened to ask, you know, one thing towards the end of my career. And then that started me down this rabbit hole because my manager did overtly silence me, but that was very, very rare. So let's talk first about your book and why you wanted to write it. And then we'll get into the big media side of it. When you say follow the science, how did you come up with the title?
HarperCollins thought of the title and I agreed with it. I think if I'd have hated it, maybe they would have, you know, I couldn't think of a better one, but I think they saw the notion that we were all told to follow the science, but the opposite was fed down our throat. And I said, yeah, let's do follow the science, but let's make the S in science a $sign. That was my little contribution, so that people understand it's not a real Dr. Anthony Fauci follow the science book. It's more what went wrong when we were told to follow the science. And I think I'm not a medical reporter, I'm an investigative reporter. That's probably why I've broken so many stories. You know, as a reporter, when you come in from the outside and you're not drinking the Kool-Aid, as they say, from the federal agencies or the public health agencies, and you just look at it from an independent, logical standpoint, there are so many stories waiting to be broken in the health arena. And I've done quite a bit of that. That certainly hasn't been my total focus. But post-COVID, you know, HarperCollins' first idea was do something about COVID and what we've learned post-COVID and so on. And I said, well, by the time this book comes out, people are already doing that quite well, like the Robert F. Kennedy book on Dr. Fauci, stuff like that. So by the time this book comes out, let's do something different. Let's look at the larger landscape beyond COVID. There's stuff about COVID in the book that still I think a lot of people hadn't heard. But way beyond COVID, how the entire scientific and medical landscape in this country has been manipulated to such a degree in a way that's intended to be invisible to us, but it's directly impacting our health and making us sicker. And we can point to some very specific reasons why and causes behind it that I think most people never knew about. So I thought that was, you know, I think one of the most fundamental important problems in this country today is the national health and the way our federal health agencies have ignored it and covered up really serious problems that have become clear to us. We all see what's going on around us, and then we go to our doctor and they act like they don't notice it in a macro sense. They just want to give you some kind of pill or treatment that they hope will work in their siloed practice. Why aren't they noticing what we all see is happening to the children and to generations and with all these chronic disorders? So I think this book is part of hopefully helping people understand what's going on. And now, I mean, certainly a lot of people didn't expect Trump to be elected and hire Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to look into these health issues. But I think a lot of this stuff is going to really explode in significance and importance as he tries to reshape some of the corruption and inefficiencies in these agencies.
Okay, the subtitle is How Big Pharma Misleads, Obscures, and Prevails. When you say prevail, what do you mean by that?
I mean, they're successful. And you talk about not experiencing a lot of knockdown dragouts in the newsroom over stories, and I've written about that. I think you're absolutely right when you look at national newsrooms across the country. Journalists have understood to self-censor. They know, you know, I think it's even a little more complex than they know where their paycheck comes from, because I never really thought about that directly. Right. They just know if they turn a certain story, it's not going to make headlines, or they're going to be told it's not going to air. Like in my case, some of these stories they just wouldn't put on television. They would never say why. They would just say it's a great story, maybe tomorrow. It's a fantastic story. We're going to save it for next week. But you start to learn what's going on. And if you don't want to beat your head against the wall and you're worried about your own career and doing meaningful stories that actually make it on television, you just don't go there. There's plenty of other stories to uncover. So I think the self-censorship became a reality after a period of time, probably 2000 to 2007, when there were knockdown dragouts in newsrooms over some of this. And then it became sort of an accepted way of operating. There was no point fighting about it. And now there's been just a hugely successful campaign to make sure the media does not honestly and fairly report very often on these vexing health issues that impact all of us.
Right. I thought it was really interesting. I was watching an interview you did with local affiliate, just a regular run of the mill. I can't remember which one, maybe a CBS. And the anchor was asking you about the HPV vaccine, and you were talking about issues with it. And I mean, I was flabbergasted that you were able to say all this stuff on the mainstream news, because I swear I just lived through like 4 years where you could not say anything negative really about a vaccine. Is it just because if a vaccine's old enough, then we can talk about it? And if it's a new one, or COVID was just, there was just so much angst about what COVID was and we're all going to die. And so this was, I'm just curious, like, is there a safety limit at which point you cross into it and now you're allowed to talk about a particular issue related to big pharma in mainstream news, but in the moment, it felt like we were not allowed to question hardly anything related, say, to the COVID vaccine over the last few years? I mean, I'm surprised that that a mainstream news station doesn't cut you off when you're talking about the HPV vaccine. But I'm just curious if you think there's something to that we like, there's enough time that's passed between us and a particular issue. Now we can start breaking it down. But as reporters, when it's happening, there's just so much more restriction around it. And I just felt like there was a lot of, there just really was a lot of propaganda that was pushed by the mainstream news during COVID with very, very, very little critical thought. And anybody who kind of drew outside the lines on that was genuinely like, I feel like those of us on the outside, whether we call it conspiracy theorists or the dirty dozen, or sorry, the disinformation dozen, it just was not looked at positively.
I think a lot of that, the residual is still there. I'm not sure where you saw me do an interview, but it may have been connected to my TV program, because outside of that, no, I have not done mainstream interviews.
Maybe it was, yeah.
About my book. In fact, the places that normally invite me on when I write a book or talk about, other things, media and so on, they will not have me on this topic. So if you saw me on a mainstream station, it's likely affiliated with my program,
right,
where they don't have control because we own the station. So
okay,
they have to
that
let
makes
me
more
say
sense.
What I want to say. So
okay. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Because I was thinking, wow, she's so lucky she gets to talk about this stuff. But maybe it's just because she's Sharyl Attkisson, and she's made her name. They can't shut her up. But Allison is not one of those people. Okay, hey, if you are looking for some good wine for whatever party it is you're coming up with the holidays, AllisonWinePromo.com. You can join my wine club and get 6 bottles of amazing extremist altitude wines from all kinds of places: Argentina, Chile, Spain, France. AllisonWinePromo.com. These are all hand selected for the stuff I like. Clean products, hand harvested grapes, family vineyards, over 200 years old, very remote parts of the world, very limited edition wines you can't get anywhere else. They support the show. They can make a great gift, and you can tell people they're free speech wines. I don't know, probably nothing better than wine to get you to start blabbering and speaking freely. So maybe they're more
it's a free speech thing.
It's a free speech thing in more ways than one. All right, AllisonWinePromo.com.
I'll put it, when we're finished, I will go over to my website, give me 10 or 15 minutes, and I will put the details there. But basically, and money proceeds from the book go to all kinds of independent journalism causes. It's selling for half price on Amazon right now. Read the 5-star reviews. But I'll send you, if you send me the receipt, a personalized book plate as a gift. You can give it to somebody, and I'll put their name on it, and give you a free mug that says, "Do your own research, make up your own mind, think for yourself," from the Sharyl Attkisson store. But I'll tell you how to do all that. Quite a few people are redeeming. I'm real happy to see that.
Awesome.
Book sales, Allison, were very strong, have been really good for this book. The New York Times can choose, without explaining, not to put some of my books have made the New York Times list. Some have sold as much at more than other books on the list, but not made the list. And this is one of those. We were number 8 the first week on the New York Times list in the country, which was great, but they wouldn't list it. So I want to keep selling books and make them look bad for not listing it. We did make Publishers Weekly bestseller list, and it's been selling well, but I'd love to keep the sales figures up. And then the proceeds go to, my ION Awards for independent reporting that I give, or the Brechner Center for Freedom of Information, Project Censored, other things that I think are important to support and sustain, that are off the narrative here.
That's interesting about the New York Times. One last thing, State Miles over on Rumble. Thanks to journalists like you and independent creators. You are the real media. Thanks so much for the tip. Yeah, and Sharyl, I really just appreciate everything that you've done. You've made it. I don't know. You have somehow continued to do this work, and I'm glad you're still alive. I always say that too, right at the end of my shows when I do so. Like, I have no suicidal ideations or anything like that. But yeah, I just really appreciate that you're somebody who has been, really at the depths of the beast, and you are willing, brave enough to talk about this stuff. There are just very few people like you out there. So I'm, really grateful. Like, somebody like me can go, well, if Sharyl can do it, I can do it. So,
Well, I think you and I, we're not followers in terms of groupthink. We're sort of curious, and we're questioners, and we're logical thinkers. So that makes us a poor fit for going along with the groupthink that's in so many newsrooms today, but that's a good thing.